Welcome to the Tech Humanist Show, a multimedia format program exploring how data and technology shape the human experience. I'm your host, Kate O'Neill.
Trying to understand the complicated emotions that we have, and how they're mediated by and influenced by, and how we intentionally shape them when it comes to technology.
Hello, humans. I'm Kate O'Neill, and this is the Tech Humanist Show. And my guest today has spent more than 15 years studying something we all experience but rarely examine carefully: how technology shapes the way we feel. She's a design researcher, faculty member at Pratt Institute, and the founder of the creative studio Subjective. She's collaborated with Google, IKEA, IBM, and the New York Public Library, and her work has appeared in the New York Times, NPR, Fast Company, and Quartz. She's spoken at South by Southwest, TEDx, Web Summit, and beyond. Her first book, Emotionally Intelligent Design, is taught in universities and used at companies around the world. And her brand new book, released June 9th, 2026, is called All the Feels: How to Stay Human in the Digital World. Let's dive into my conversation with Pamela Pavliscak. Now, Pamela, yay, it's so good to have you here.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here. I'm
Oh.
excited to talk to this audience of tech humanists.
Yeah. I think they're really going to be interested in this. And, I'm interested in it. Like as far as I know, you describe your life's work as studying the future of feelings. Is that a fair kind of articulation of it?
Yeah, I think so. I'm just interested in everything related to our emotional life and how it connects to technology in particular. And
Yeah.
so, I think every aspect of that is fascinating to me and tells us something about where we're headed.
Yeah. I mean, it's a really rich lane that you've chosen. Like what was it about that made it the thing that you couldn't stop following and thinking about?
Yeah, so I've worked in the industry for quite a few years, and I kept realizing that every project we worked on, there was this piece of it that we weren't paying enough attention to. So we'd be working on an app or a website or wearable, and it's like, oh, can people use it easily? Do they find it engaging? But we're not really like talking about all the complicated feelings. So it really hit me once. I was working with a big agency. This was over a decade ago now. The project was on something completely different. I think it was video streaming, but I was having it was kind of a thing where we went into people's homes and observed and talked to them. And this fellow was showing me, pulling up something on his phone and showing me. And he had all these pictures of butterflies popping up on his phone. And I was like, oh, wow, that's very cool. Are you interested in butterflies? And I had wished I'd known the word for like a butterfly specialist, but I don't. And I still don't to this day. But I was like, are you really interested in that? And he's like, no, it's funny because my dad died a couple years ago. And at the funeral, a butterfly landed on my sister's shoulder. And we all felt like he was present. And so every time we think about him, we don't have to send anything else, just a picture of a butterfly. And I was like, I still get a little bit broken up thinking about it today, but I was like, this is what I need to study. This is what I need to understand is like how technology gets in the middle of everything and all of our feelings. And so, that's something I kind of dialed back. Corporate got into a more academic setting and started really trying to understand the complicated emotions that we have, and how they're mediated by and influenced by, and how we intentionally shape them when it comes to technology.
Yeah. And you've been doing this for a long time, more than 20 years, right? That in a
Yeah,
space, in a
yeah,
related space, right? So it
yeah.
means, to me, that means you were asking these questions long before anybody was calling it like digital well-being. And so I wonder like what it is you think people were missing then that, you could already see.
I don't know. I think, so if you go back, there maybe there's like periods. If you go back like 20 years, everyone was just really excited about the
Hmm.
possibilities, as I was too. Because I mean, I was doing like cultural studies and Russian literature, and I switched over to like human computer interaction. Like everyone was really excited. What can this technology do? Let's try things. I bet it's going to be great for us and make us more connected. And so there was that initial period. So I don't think it was really a part of it. It was more experimental. And now we kind of look back at that and we're like, wow, those were the good old days. Like that was really great, right? Like people feel a lot of nostalgia for that period. And a lot of what we're trying to do right now, at least I see, is like this kind of pushback against, algorithmic curation and trying to go back to that. And a lot of people are like, yeah, that Web 1.0 era, that was really cool. Which it was, no denying. Then we're sort of like, oh, what? We can make money off this thing, this
Hmm.
internet thing. And then the focus was really on like, how do we do that? How do we make it frictionless? How do we help people do what they need to do? And then gradually it got more and more kind of persuasive. And so I think it was at that point people were seeing, the emotional effects. But as you say, I think I was kind of tuned into it even before that. Although I've worked on my fair share of digital well-being initiatives, and I think that is problematic on its own too, because usually our digital well-being initiatives are sort of like, well, that kind of came along as a movement when we already were noticing the effects of persuasive design or even addictive
Right.
design, right? And so the idea was like, well, for the big tech companies that I worked with anyway, it was like, well, how can we help people but not actually change anything we're doing? So,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
that
yeah.
was,
And
yeah.
that I want to ask you about that because the title of your book is a bit of a provocation that relates to this because the dominant cultural message right now is basically your phone is making you miserable, touch grass. And you're saying, not quite. Walk us through what the research actually shows.
Yeah, well, so I think it's interesting because this idea we've all adapted, and the tech companies, I don't know if they started it or not, but they framed it as like, okay, we're going to show people their stats, like how long you've been online, and
Hmm.
then you can sit with that, feel a little ashamed, maybe
Right.
do a little less time. And, and for some reason, that became the dominant narrative
Hmm.
of digital detox. It's like, well, it's all about the time you spend online. If you spend less time, and there's even, the initial message of some of the well-being movements, like the Center for Humane Technology, I think, was like time well spent. Like spend less time on your phone, spend more time elsewhere. But what the research shows, and this is actually common sense, like I think we all feel it, is like there's a difference between spending an hour doom scrolling and spending an hour on FaceTime with your grandma, right?
Right.
Those are different activities. They are both
An
online.
hour of screen time, right? Yeah,
That's an
either way.
hour of screen time, right? And so that's common sense. And then
Hmm.
the academic research kind of is catching up and saying, like, yeah, the time isn't quite as important as
Hmm.
how you spend that time. And to me, that really spoke to me because I had already started collecting these diaries. And so I can give that some context too, because people
Yeah.
hear diaries and one thing they think is like, Dear Diary,
Right.
today I scrolled the internet. No, it's not like that. And it's not that I picked 100 people and I followed them for like 10 years. That would be really interesting. But it was much more in the kind of framework of an ethnography where I go in, I observe people, I ask them to share like kind of snippets, like share a short video, share a screen, share like annotate something you've been doing, highs and lows or emotional moments or things that were significant to you. I left it kind of open at first and then evolved over the years. But that was something I was already seeing is that, yeah, there were some people who had like big numbers of screen time, but the way they were spending it felt really meaningful, intimate with their friends or their family, creative sometimes. And so when I started noticing that research and paying attention to it, I was like, wow, this makes a lot of sense. And there's even research that says like the people that were restricted from going online, in one study at least, when the restrictions were off, they actually spent more time online, kind of like yo-yo dieting or something
Right,
like that.
right.
And you can see how that would happen too. Like again, that feels like common sense. It's like, yeah,
I gotta catch up,
you
right?
got
Like
to
on all
catch
the things I
up
missed.
and you reward yourself a little bit. Like it
Right.
was good. You know, it is kind of like dieting, like, oh, I was so good yesterday. I can have a little treat today, you know? And I was like, that's
A
just
digital donut, as it
yeah,
were.
digital donut. Like it's so human, right?
Yeah.
To do that. And so so that's what I really got interested in was like, okay, how can I learn more about how people are spending their time well, I guess, you know, and if it's not how much time you spend, but how you spend that time, then what can I learn about that? What can we do? And I mean, I guess like a bigger thing you could think about too is like we're living in this tech ecosystem that often feels beyond our control,
Mm,
right? And of course, there are lots of good people involved in trying to make things better in various
mm,
ways. But as individuals, it
mm.
can feel like that. So, what can we do to still like not live in a state of constant like threat and anxiety and fear? And that's what kind of compelled me on this.
Yeah, yeah. There's so many things that I want to ask you in follow up, but I guess one of them is if screen time is the wrong metric, then do you have a recommendation for what the right metric is? It sounds like it's very qualitative and that's fair, but is there a way that people can codify or quantify what they're doing online?
Um, I think, you know, what I always tell people is kind of one thing is like follow your feeling, follow
Hmm.
the gut. So like if you're feeling like if you're doing something and it makes you feel bad about yourself,
Hmm.
think less of somebody else, feel dead inside, you're overcome with existential dread. That's not what you should be doing
Hmm. Hmm.
online. And a lot of times it's we get attracted to the things that are bad for us or that even make us feel bad. And I get it, but paying attention to that is probably like, at least for individuals, a good metric. For companies, I don't know. I think it's harder because they're not they're measuring they have not very sophisticated measures. Like they have time, they have what you click on, what you looked at, ads you followed. I mean, it's still fairly rudimentary. And I don't know if we want them to track things that are more
Right.
meaningful either.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
like, I'm not
Fair.
really
Fair.
sure about that. So I don't know what that metric is for them. In that case, I think it's a matter of looking at how their design is impacting people and making a decision to do it a different way. But for individuals, I do think like you know
Yeah.
what is sustaining to you and what is kind of chipping away at you. And yeah, sometimes it's hard. And I think that's the other thing that we fall into a lot right now. There's a lot of shame going around about shaming each other for things that we're doing online and feeling ashamed ourselves of what we're doing online. And some of that is like the time we're spending online, some of that, lot of shame right now about AI use and shaming other people for it, calling people out for it, yet still doing it yourself.
Right.
And there aren't a lot of social norms around that. And so I think that's another thing too that I really hope that this book will do is actually let people feel okay about having conversations about this kind of stuff and not feeling perfect. Because I don't know about you, but I'm like not a meditator. I'm not a yoga person. I'm not like seeking calm from, and I feel like a lot of digital detox, digital well-being, even the like kind of this the purity culture around tech is either it's that like it's either you're all in and that's bad and clearly so many bad things about it, or you have to be this like totally calm Zen person. And I'm not either of those. And I feel like a lot of people aren't those either. And for a
Yeah.
long time, I was like, maybe I can be a calm person. And I got like a Muse headset, that's like a brainwave tracking headset. You probably know, but maybe not everyone listening knows. It's like
Sure.
tracks your
Yeah.
brainwaves. And, if you can make the storms go away, the mental storms. It's like an audio cue. And the birds come out like you're calm. I never could do it. It's
Oh no.
like I tried, believe me, and I've tried all the things, but I'm just not, I'm like kind of a high energy manic person, like I don't want, it's just not me. And
Yeah.
I wanted like, part of this is selfish. Like I just wanted a path for myself to feel like not like a bad person if I use technology at all. And that's kind of part of the, I guess, like the personal motivation behind.
Yeah, I feel like that's 100% like every author's story and every entrepreneur's story, right? Like I wanted this solution for myself and that's what kept me going. But also I'm hearing this really interesting parallel to the climate story in some way, right? Like the tendency to blame individuals for our consumption behavior when the much bigger issue is systemic and has to do with the large producers of carbon and so on. Like what it sounds like is, we've been given imperfect systems to try to thrive in and then blamed for, our failure to pull ourselves out of the victimhood of consuming them the way they're designed in some
Yeah,
sense.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And so I think, and it's complicated, right? Because like
Hmm.
we have agency, we have free will. People are doing, they're making hacks, they're making adaptations, they're rebelling, they're pushing back, they're doing all kinds of really interesting stuff. But it's almost like we don't go there because it feels like, well, then you're living with it. You're not saying, and it feels good, right? It feels good to be like, that's bad, that's wrong, and I know it is. And then go back to being exactly the same way you were being before, because until big tech fixes it or government regulates it, we're doomed. So we may as well just like be doomed, And I feel like there's something in that, and I find that appealing too, and especially as somebody who like teaches people who are going to come up in the industry and has worked in the industry herself. It's like, yeah, they have a lot of problems. They are messed up, and I personally am not going to unmess them up, and it's a big tangle of events. And so it's like, and it feels good to identify that, but then it kind of feels bad to be like, okay, well, I'm just gonna live with this, feel terrible about it until it gets fixed by whatever. And I don't think it will. And so I think you're right.
Yeah.
Like the climate analogy is very right in that sense too, because it's like we're living in it. There's limited amounts of things we can do to change it. There's a little bit here and there. Like I'm
Sure.
sure it all adds up, right? In both cases, right, there are ways to push back, and I think that's worthwhile. But it's like one of those wicked problems, right, where it's
Sure.
like you need big, big tech industry to make changes, you need government to make changes, you need companies to make changes, and maybe individuals too. But in the meantime, like, what do we do? Just
Right.
nothing.
To
And
your,
that's sort of my
yeah,
piece is like, we haven't
exactly.
really explored that domain. So far, it's been like, just turn it off. Just put your phone in the other room, throw it in the ocean if you can.
Yeah,
That would be
yeah.
like optimum. But
And it seems like you're giving us a way to integrate it better. And I know there's a distinction you draw that I think is really a relevant segue here between emotional life on the internet and emotional life with AI. So why does that distinction matter, and what is different?
well, yeah. So AI is a little bit different, right? Because the a lot of our spaces on the internet feel more like conduits for our emotion, like they're mediating us with each other or us with ourselves, our own identity. Now, we know that there's aspects of the design that are geared towards influencing our emotions here and there, but that's basically it. But when we get to at least what we're all calling AI now, which is
Hmm.
generative AI with a conversational interface,
Hmm.
and who knows how long that conversational interface is going to be the standard, but it looks like it's sticking around. And it's relational, right? Like we are, not only is it trained on romantic poetry, the
Hmm.
scientific literature of the 21st century, all that weirdness of the internet where we amplify our emotions to fill in for nonverbals and make up weird words to convey like micro feelings and all that. It's trained on all that. We would maybe don't even know all that stuff, but it's trained on it.
Right.
But it also is talking to us and learning from us. And so that really struck me. Like when the Soul document came out for Claude and it said
Hmm.
something about functional feelings. And I was like, I think that's what they're getting at is
Hmm.
that it's I mean, we're always in a relationship with our technology, but we're really in it now, whether we want to be or not. Because we're having conversations. And from that conversation, it's learning stuff about us. It's picking up tone from words or our voice if we're doing a voice input. I'm sure at some future point it will pick up other emotional cues, which, and I've studied emotional AI too, and it's very imperfect and kind of creepy, but it is used and they will use it. So it's like, so it is learning from us. And that just makes it substantively a different thing. I think what else
Hmm.
makes it different, as I hinted at before, is like we don't know what is the right way to use this.
Hmm.
Social media we've had for like 10, 15 years. Internet 25 years maybe or something like that. Like a long time. So we've developed, I mean, we've gone through growing pains, we've developed social norms. We know like what's the right thing to do, what's the wrong thing, kind of. I mean, like within reason. I'll give you a minute.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I don't know if I should
We
stop.
go ahead and cut this for just a second. Hang on, I got a little.
Okay, sure. Good. That gives me a chance to drink some water too. It's totally allergy season. Right before this, I was
Damn.
just like, just sneezing my head off. So,
I'm sorry. So back in
okay,
I
so
don't know if you
back
remember
in,
where you were.
let's see, I was talking about, the expectations. So
The
let's just back
yeah,
up. Like,
the time frames and everything. Yeah.
yeah, so we've learned more or less social norms and conventions about using social media, using the internet. With AI, with this latest brand of conversational generative AI, and I don't mean conversational like a customer service chatbot where it's like they can only answer two questions or like the current form of Siri even would qualify as that, where you can't really have a back and forth. But I'm talking about like ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini and all those ones where the conversation feels more realistic, and it can do a lot more, even though in our heads we might know, like, yeah, it's just predictive text essentially, or whatever. It's just, we still relate to it in a different way, and we don't have social norms and conventions about it. So I think the other thing that's different about it is everyone is trying to figure it out collectively together, and we're doing it badly. Like, we're not, I mean, I'm sorry, but like, we are really shaming each other. And shame is never good, because that means like somebody is just going to hide what they're doing and not talk about it. So, for instance, I have students in their 20s. They use AI. I mean, I teach a class related to it, so it's allowed in a lot of cases. But there are other cases where it's sort of murky and dark. Like, how do I write an email to my professor? You might turn to AI for that, because like,
Hmm.
you don't know what's the right thing to say.
Hmm.
And then why don't we not have a discussion about that? Why is it like, that's wrong? And now I'm gonna, I can't give you a bad grade for that, but I can have a bad opinion about you, or like, that kind of stuff. I just think we need to give each other some grace
Hmm.
and really let people talk about this stuff, and not just be like flexing all the time, like, yeah, I don't use AI, so I don't even know what that's about. Or like, oh, you should not do that. Or, oh, I would never, because odds are, yes, you have ever. And if you haven't, you will. Or you just don't know you have, because it's in
Yeah.
everything. And so
Yeah.
I think we've got to give each other that kind of space to figure this out, because we're all in the same boat. And I don't think AI is, the devil. I think it can help us in a lot of ways, and not just work ways. I
Mhm.
think it can be you know, it can have personal identity and relationship self-knowledge uses. So I don't know if we want to talk about that too.
I totally want to talk about that. However, my
I
doorbell is
figure
ringing.
you're
Yeah,
gonna
sorry. Hang on one sec,
pause.
okay? I'm so
Okay,
sorry.
that's totally fine.
Okay, sorry. Hopefully the guy doesn't need a signature from
This
me.
is great. I love this, that you're getting interruptions. That makes me feel a lot better, actually.
It's it's nice that it means we can just slice in. I always joke when I'm doing a podcast where they let me know that we can make interruptions, that my safe word is avocado. So if we say avocado, that means we're cutting it. So here we go.
I
We
love
actually do
I
have
love
avocado in this segment.
avocado. Okay.
But let's take you back to the close. I think you closed that thought nicely, and then I'll just come back in with a follow up to that.
Okay, sure. Sounds good.
Because I think so this is all super fascinating. Everything you're saying is so rich and so nuanced. But one of them, to me, one of the most striking ideas about the book and in what you've explored in your Substack is that the contrary to popular opinion, that the internet isn't necessarily impoverishing our vocabulary, that it's actually expanding it. And you use this term neo emotions. So I would
Mhm.
love for you to talk to us about what those are and why they matter.
Oh, yeah. So that's, to me, that's just fun in some ways, because I'm like, oh, wow, that you always see news stories here and there about like, oh, there's the orange peel theory trend, or goblin mode is the
Right.
Oxford, word of the year, whatever. And I love that kind of stuff. But then I started really digging into it and looking at it, and it would keep popping up in all my studies too. And I was like, what is going on with this? And it turns out that this is, it has kind of a rich academic history in a way. Like, first of all, I would say, emotion theory has really evolved from a few basic emotions and being more kind of instinctual or evolutionary to us thinking that emotions are largely constructed, meaning that like we have some of those signals still, and there may be some core, feeling that we have that's embodied, but a lot of it comes from our personal experience and our culture and our social norms. And so to me, so that theory is, best known and expressed through Lisa Feldman Barrett's work,
Mhm.
but she didn't talk about the internet at all. And I was like, wait a second. The internet is like this emotion invention machine, and the internet is its own culture, right? Like we may exist in American culture, or maybe even like a region of American culture, like New York, its
Mhm.
own thing, right? And don't even get me started on upstate and what that is. So, but
I don't even know what upstate is. I don't think there's
nobody
any
knows.
agreement
It's a
on what
mystery.
upstate is.
Um, but the internet is its own culture
Mhm.
too. It's like a global, international weirdness that we all share in, right? And so I was like, okay, that's interesting. Then I was like, well, okay, so maybe if, the argument is that learning more emotion words, whether they're more, nuanced emotion words in your own language or learning new emotion words in another language that are highly specific is good for us because it helps us not feel so alone in our feelings, first of all, and it helps us to deal with them. I was like, that's great. But then lately, what's been happening is sociologists have been getting in the game and they're like, yeah, there's actually this thing called neo emotions. And they started studying it again in climate theory, and looking at how people are using language to kind of help them through difficult emotions or share in emotions, just like we do when we learn any kind of new emotion word. And I was like, well, that's really astonishing because I think that happens on the internet all the time. We invent a really specific emotion word. And now some of them come from experts, right? And from academic study, like there's cyberchondria. We don't just walk around talking about like, oh, we, become convinced that we have a terrible disease from talking with ChatGPT or searching Google or whatever. But we've all probably done it. And so, but that comes from the academic literature and expert study and identifying that condition. But most of those words they bubble up from the culture to deal with a new feeling that we're having in the moment. So like in 2020s, I think 2021, 2022, Goblin Mode was like word of the year for Oxford. And it bubbled up because everyone felt like a little bit weird and feral, coming out of the pandemic, right? And then I mentioned that to my students in like 2025, and they're like, what even is that word? And I described it and they're like, oh, bed rot. And I'm like, yeah. So we keep coming up with these very specific words for that encapsulate. I mean, not all new internet words are a feeling, but a lot of them are. And then, you look further and you're like, okay, the internet is its own culture. A lot of these are really specific, like the long form feeling structures that we have, like she's a 10, but
Mm.
etc. I would say that I call that a long form feeling. Like that's something that's generative and can have infinite variations, or like that feeling when TFW is probably the first example of that kind of feeling. And there's memes,
Yeah. Yeah.
incredibly
You talk about
complicated. I do,
memotions,
yeah.
right? Memes
Yeah,
functioning as emotional
emotions.
shorthand.
Yeah, they're like incredibly specific, yet flexible and relatable that we can all participate in. And I think that's the cool thing about internet neo emotions is that um, they're flexible, they're participatory, like we can all kind of play a role. And so, but I don't think that's how they're presented a lot of times.
Right.
A lot of times they're presented as like, here's a cool new TikTok trend. And then everybody who's like over 25 is like, oh, I feel really dumb now because I don't know this. And all the young people are like, ha, we know stuff, you don't. And that feels really good when you're like a teenager or a young person. And then it kind of disappears. And I was like, and I'm over here, I'm like, wait a second. I'm still trying to figure this out because I think this is really like helping us in a weird way work through some stuff, you know. And so, recently I kind of shared a list of like AI related emotions that was making the rounds because I'm like, boy, do we need it for AI because we're having all these weird feelings. And yeah, not all of them are great feelings. Most, I would say probably 80% aren't because it's guilt and shame and like uncertainty, but it's helpful to be able to articulate them. And that's why I think we gravitate towards these words and we love stories about new words and we love when they pop up and we love sharing them, even if they disappear after a while. And it also just gave me something really handy for the book, too, because this was a big question like my editors had, which was okay, you're writing about the internet. How is it not just going to go poof, disappear after, like, even before it's published? And I was like, you know what? I think it's about patterns. Like,
Hmm.
so you'll notice in the book, like, I have really old memes existing with things that are pretty new. And I think they can all happily coexist because they tell us something about how we're trying to process our emotions collectively, often
Yeah.
online.
Yeah, but I do still think I'm wondering if listeners may be asking in their minds a pointed version of the question that underlies this section of our discussion, which is that if the internet is expanding our emotional range, why does it so often feel like it's narrowing it? Like why is outrage the loudest emotion in the feed?
Well, okay, there's a simple answer to that.
Okay.
It's because that one really is because of the way the algorithms are designed.
Hmm.
So, and that has been honed and refined. So, you may recall, Kate, because you've been working in tech for a while too, there
Hmm.
was a time that we thought the most viral emotions were like joy and wonder and
Hmm.
happiness. And indeed, like intense emotions do promote engagement. But what works even better is outrage and anger. And so most of the social media algorithms really privilege that emotion, or they privilege really strong emotions just in general. That's why when like you're scrolling your feed, it feels intense and all mixed up and overwhelming, right? Because it's like, oh, there's a wedding picture from my friend. Oh, there's a war-torn country. Oh, here's a climate catastrophe. Oh, my ex got engaged. Oh, like, and it's all next to each other. And you're just like, ah, in freeze mode
Yeah.
from that. And then thank God we have like irony and humor, which sort of is a pressure valve and kind of breaks that pattern. So memes kind of function as that too, to kind of be like, okay, things are getting too crazy. We need to like break it up a little bit. So we use irony and humor to be a little less vulnerable, but I think it's also kind of a pressure valve. It sort of just like releases that overwhelm that we feel. But I think that's a big part of it is we get sucked in because it's designed to capitalize on those particular emotions.
Yeah, so I'm really glad that you've named that because it does seem like that's a really important piece to sort of unpack the design of these systems,
Yeah,
which is an ethics and power question, not just a UX question, right?
it
So,
is. It's all of
um, yeah. So where's the line between persuasion and manipulation in an emotionally intelligent interface? Is it a clear line? Is it always a
I
spectrum?
think it probably isn't always a clear line because it might depend on the person. What might be
Hmm.
persuasive to one person might be manipulative to another. But I do think, like, if you're designing something and you are really focused on keeping people in a sort of hypervigilant state, that's bad, right? Like That's not going to be good for people.
Right.
And so I think, I teach designers and we talk about this and how they do have some power, right? Like they are going to get in an organization where they will be pressured to design toward particular metrics of engagement that are going to require that intense emotion. But the industry has tried to push back on that from time to
Mhm.
time. I mean, pre-X Twitter tried a pause. So it was kind of like an empathy prompt. So it's like, before you post this, do you want to look at this person's profile first and like kind of remind you that, like, oh, that's a human. Sometimes it's not, it's sometimes a bot, but what,
Right.
like the idea was there. And there certainly Instagram still lets you hide likes and things and make some controls. But the problem with a lot of those design interventions is that they're buried in settings. They're not a prompt that comes up from time to time. Um, I don't think most of them even come up in the initial like onboarding process that
Yeah.
we experience. And so people just don't know about them, or you just develop your own workarounds because it's easier than wading through like 100 different settings that you're not sure exactly what they do. Because I mean, I'm working from the inside on this stuff, and I still have to find like a YouTube video that's going to walk me through a particular setting sometimes because I'm like, I'm not exactly sure what this does, and I don't want it to mess up this other thing that I like in my feed. So, um, but yeah, so I don't think there's a clear line on some of these things, but I do think if you're designing interventions to counteract the original thing you designed, like screen time notifications or settings, says to me that maybe time to reassess
Yeah.
the main part of what you're designing.
Yeah, there's a good chance it needs some reconsideration, right? It does remind me again of the environmental discussion because, there's this whole idea that we talk about environmental externalities and the idea that companies bear responsibility for the pollution they create downstream. And I'm wondering if we should be talking about emotional externalities the same way, like holding platforms accountable for the emotional damage they produce at scale. Have you given that any thought? Do you
Yeah,
have a
I
position
mean,
on that?
I feel like that's kind of a missing bit in our
Mm,
ethics conversations right now because I think the reason that's really really frustrating because right, we've had like tech ethicists now maybe for working actively and big groups of them and lots of people framing themselves as this and working even inside companies for years now, and we haven't really seen any movement on it. That's immensely frustrating. And I know there's a lot of reasons for that. But I wonder if, like, the emotional impact, the mental health impact, well, a lot of times it is framed as mental health, but maybe that's not even strong enough for that. Might push it a little further. It's really hard to say. I mean, I think that can work. I think to take the climate and environmental
mhm,
analogy further, I think climate activists are looking at that too. They're looking at like the emotional impact of climate change and things like solastalgia, where
mhm.
you're anticipating missing something that's going to be gone, for instance, um, as a way in to figuring out how we how we adjust our ethics or just take into account individuals a little bit more and make it less abstract and more kind of visceral, like we actually experience it. Because I think that's a problem with a lot of intractable issues like climate or like big tech, where it's like it feels too big and too complicated, and we don't know where to even start.
Yeah.
And maybe looking at how it makes us feel as is a way that is more, I don't know, approachable or understandable.
Yeah, I think going back to the tech ethicists, then from that point, I wonder, when you think about the tech ethicists who listen to this show or watch the show, as many do, what design or policy guardrails would you think are genuinely necessary for AI systems that engage emotional needs and probably not just be transparent about being AI, but harder structural things? What would you say those would need to be?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I have an easy answer for that, but I think we know the things that aren't working so well, which is um, just an on-off switch. Like, I think it's pretty clear, like bans don't work for a variety of reasons. People have workarounds. It doesn't really make the company make any changes to what they're doing. It puts all the burden on the individual, whether it's a kid or whether it's parents. And then they go, let's say they truly didn't use that technology for a while, then they have to go back into it cold and figure it out. Um, so that to me,
Meanwhile, the models are advancing every single
meanwhile, the
day, right?
models are advancing. Like I just don't think that's the way,
Hmm.
I just don't think that's, and it's not realistic. Like if you know young people, I mean, or you were a young person, that's not gonna work.
Right.
So, so I think trying to think less about like the perfect
Hmm.
solution and think more about like what would have an impact on the biggest everyday uses. So I know we love to have, read stories about like somebody who fell in love with their chatbot. I feel like that's a rarer story. And definitely there should be guardrails to protect people who are vulnerable and who are had a loss or feel a deep loneliness and are really susceptible to that. I think that's important. But I think looking at the broader use is really critical too. How are people broadly using generative AI for emotional needs? Well, they're using it to rehearse difficult conversations. They're using it to get feedback on how they communicate with somebody. They're using it for a lot of things where it's like hard, even if you have friends in your life or close family members, like they're not always available to you. And so I think those are probably pretty realistic ways to use it, but we don't know what's too much, what's too little, what's the right thing, how safe are we revealing this information, how it's going to be used later. So I think those kind of scenarios should be included too. It's important to kind of design for the worst case where somebody is really deeply attached and manipulated, but then also to think about those more everyday uses because there's some things we know already, right? We know that like AI does a better job at communicating sometimes difficult things. But if the other person knows that you just wholesale dropped in some AI response, they're not going to like it because you didn't put in the effort. You didn't put in the thought yourself. And so there's got to be some kind of middle ground there where you can learn from it and learn to communicate a little bit better, but also not alienate other people. And so it's sort of like, I don't know. So that's what I would think too. But we focus very much on displacement theory, right? Which is like, oh, AI is going to replace a person in your life. And I feel like that's sort of, way out here on the spectrum for most people, where we're more kind of like in this murky middle zone. And so I feel like that is a very key area to focus on.
Yeah, and I know we're running out of time, or
Yeah.
maybe even over time at this point. But I just want to give you an opportunity to sort of wrap up and close the thoughts. And usually, I like to ask a very hopeful, like what keeps you hopeful kind of question. But I also want to weave that together with the subtitle of your book, which is How to Stay Human in the Digital World, right? So, like, because that phrase is doing a lot of work, and I wonder when you stay human, What is it you're actually trying to protect? And then how do you weave in that hopeful vision of the future for humanity into that?
Yeah. Well, I thought about that subtitle because a lot of times when we're engaging with technology, it feels a little robotic ourselves, right? Because it feels like there's not the tech sensory texture. We're not getting a full sense of the other person. We feel like we're just kind of going through the motions that somebody else designed for us. So I meant that. But I also meant like what gives me hope, which is what I saw in my research is that people are figuring out new ways to live well with technology. And by doing kind of small things to stay connected with somebody, like I had one participant who, for 10 years, every Friday, sent a GIF summarizing his week to his college roommate. And I was like, whoa, that's really cool. Is the technology designed for that kind of thing? I don't know. I mean, it supports it. But that's kind of what gives me hope is that people are inventive, people are creative. We've always woven our personal lives and our relationships together with technology, whether it's like trains or radio or MTV or whatever it's been. We've It's been good, it's been bad, but we've prevailed and we've figured it out. And what's important to humans, it's feeling not just like well-being, it's feeling alive, right? We want to feel like vital, creative, like a deep sense of purpose, a real intimacy with other people. And I see people doing that in small ways and being more intentional. And that's what gives me hope.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Pamela, for being here. All the Feels is available when?
It is out and about now in the US. It released June 9th and in the UK, June 11th.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Pamela.
Yeah, thank you, Kate. This was great.
Thank you for listening to The Tech Humanist Show. This episode was produced and edited by Thrive Loud Productions, with research by Ashley Robinson and Aaron Daughtry of Interabang. You can find more information about the show's guests and links to their projects at thetechhumanist.com, where you can also find more episodes, or you can subscribe at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Special thanks to all of our guests for lending their voices to help make the future a brighter place. I'm Kate O'Neill. You've been listening to The Tech Humanist Show from KO Insights.